Hey, before we dive in, I just want to ask a quick favor. Please take a moment to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like this explainer, and leave a comment to support the channel. Your engagement truly helps.
All right, so today we're diving into something that is, let's be honest, so important in the professional world, but also one of the toughest things to get right. We're talking about how to give and receive constructive criticism. You know, when you nail this, it can totally build trust and supercharge growth. But if you get it wrong, oh boy, it can do the complete opposite.
So, here's what we've got on the agenda. First, we're going to look at why feedback fails so often. Then, we'll lay out a blueprint for doing it right. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of giving powerful feedback. Then, we'll flip it around and talk about how to receive it with grace. And finally, we'll get into those really tricky conversations.
Okay, let's kick things off with a big problem, right? Why is this thing that's supposed to help us grow so often a source of major tension and just plain misunderstanding?
I mean, seriously, think about it. The last time you had to give someone critical feedback, or you were on the receiving end, how did that feel? If you're like most people, it was probably a knot of anxiety, a little bit of awkwardness, right? It's just so hard because this stuff cuts right to the heart of who we are at work and how we relate to our colleagues.
And this is really the emotional minefield we're walking into. The number one reason feedback goes wrong, it hits our defensiveness button. It just feels like a personal attack, you know? And that's a really deep-seated instinct we all have. What's interesting is that both people, the giver and the receiver, feel totally vulnerable in that moment. And if it's handled badly, man, it can just shred any trust you've built. Plus, a lot of the time, feedback is just blurted out impulsively, maybe in a moment of frustration. And when that happens, it almost never has the specific, actionable advice that would actually, help.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, it all comes down to building a much better foundation. We need a solid blueprint for what actually makes feedback constructive. Think of it as our framework for success. At its core, you got to remember, constructive criticism isn't about tearing someone down or just pointing out flaws. It's about building them up. The whole point is to improve performance, improve outcomes. And the absolute key is doing it without making things tense or causing offense. The goal here is to help, plain and simple, not to hurt.
And wow, the difference between constructive and destructive is just night and day. Look at this. Constructive is all about growth and improvement. Destructive, it's all about blame. One focuses on specific behaviors you can actually see, while the other is just vague and personal. And the impact? Totally different worlds. One builds trust, the other just kills motivation. I mean, the examples say it all, right? Your presentation was terrible. Where do you even go from there? It's a dead end. But the structure could be clearer. Let's try outlining 3 main ideas. See? Now that starts a real conversation.
All right, with that blueprint locked in, let's get practical. Let's talk about the actual tools you need to deliver this kind of powerful feedback. This is the giver's playbook.
Okay, so one of the best tools you can have in your back pocket is something called the SBI model. It's super simple, really easy to remember, and it gives you this amazing framework to share feedback that's clear, objective, and way less likely to make someone put their guard up. It's just 3 easy steps. First, S is for situation. You describe exactly when and where this happened. You're setting the scene. Second, B is for behavior. This is where you describe the specific thing you saw or heard. Super important. This is not a judgment about them as a person. And finally, I is for impact. You explain the effect of that behavior, what actually happened because of it. See how it creates this clear, logical line from an event to an outcome?
Let's put it all together. Imagine saying this. During the presentation this morning, That's the situation. You interrupted several colleagues. That's the behavior, and this caused some confusion and really slowed down the discussion. That's the impact. See how different that is? You're not saying you're rude, you're just laying out the facts, and that makes it so much easier to have a productive chat instead of a big argument.
But of course, giving feedback is only half the battle, right? Knowing how to receive it with grace, that is just as important. So now, let's flip the script and talk about what it looks like from the recipient side. So, what's the biggest hurdle to taking feedback well? It's our own defensiveness. It's that gut reaction to put up a wall when we feel like we're being criticized. But here's the thing. If we can learn to manage that impulse, we can turn feedback from something we totally dread into something we actually see as valuable. So how do we actually do that? Well, here's the game plan. Step 1 is the simplest, but maybe the hardest. Just listen. Don't interrupt. Your only job in that moment is to understand, not to build your counter-argument. You have to fight that urge to jump in and defend yourself. A simple, okay, thank you for the feedback, can work wonders to lower the tension. And then get curious. Ask questions. Something like, could you give me a specific example of when I did that? That is so powerful. It shows you're actually listening, and it helps you get the specific details you need to, get better.
All right, now let's level up. What happens when the conversation gets really tough? When the feedback is super sensitive or the person you're talking to starts getting defensive? This is where you really need to master the nuance.
First things first, you have to be able to spot the warning signs in real time. Are they interrupting you? Are they starting to make excuses or blame someone else? Or maybe they're just shutting down, withdrawing completely. As soon as you see those signals, that's your cue to take a breath, slow things down, and maybe change your approach.
And one of the most powerful tools you have for this is switching from you statements to I statements. Think about it. You never meet deadlines. That just sounds like an accusation, and it's almost guaranteed to make someone defensive. But what if you rephrased it as, I'm feeling concerned that the deadline wasn't met? It completely changes the energy of the conversation. It's not about blame anymore, it's about your observation. And that turns a potential fight into the start of a problem-solving discussion. So, we've covered a lot today, haven't we? From the basic blueprint of what good feedback looks like to specific tools like the SBI model and I statements. But here's the thing. None of this matters if you don't actually use it. So, I'm going to leave you with a question to think about. Which one of these tools are you going to try out in your very next feedback conversation?
Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like, and leave a comment to support the channel.